Welcome to your Artsy Girl podcast. I am your host, Christina Carrere. This is a podcast about art, poetry, writing, and anything about creativity. Sit back, relax, and get your dose of brain food to get your creative juices flowing. Welcome to episode 44. Today's featured guest is Frederick-Douglass Knowles II. He is the inaugural Poet Laureate for Hartford, Connecticut. His collection of poetry, BlackRoseCity, was featured in the 2018 Association of Writers and Writing Programs. His works have featured in the Connecticut River Review, Poems on the Road to Peace, a tribute to Dr. King by Yale UP, Fingernails Across the Chalkboard, Poetry on HIV/AIDS by Third World Press. The Mississippi University for Women nominated his poem, Mason Freeman Cuts Jenkins Down, for a Pushcart Prize. He is the recipient of the 2019 Nutmeg Poetry Award. Frederick-Douglass is an associate professor of English at Three Rivers Community College. Everyone, please welcome my next featured guest, Frederick-Douglass Knowles II. Hi, Frederick. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, Christine. It's a pleasure.
I have known you a while because we go way back to the Connecticut Urban Artists Initiative program, the Norwich chapter back in the day. And while I moved away from Norwich for many years now, you still live there, but so much has happened for you literary-wise, besides being the English professor at Three Rivers Community College, in which you delivered an inspiring commencement speech this year for the new graduates there.
Thank you.
I listened to it online. It was very moving. But before we get into that, please tell the audience how it was like growing up in Norwich, Connecticut, because that is primarily what your poetry collection is about, isn't it?
Yes, the book BlackRoseCity. So I grew up in Norwich, Connecticut, and Norwich is known as the official rose of New England. And historically, it has been a mill town during the industrial era. And we're most infamously known for the home of Benedict Arnold, who was, of course, the traitor in the Revolutionary War and so forth. Once the industrial area slowed down and the mills closed down, Norwich really became this kind of almost literally like a ghost town. And, being raised in this ghost town, my grandmother coming up from Georgia, part of the Great Migration and so forth, and landed in Norwich and actually raised us in a predominantly white neighborhood. And so, growing up, I grew up in a predominantly white neighborhood. I was, used to being the only black kid in all my classes from like kindergarten to sixth grade and so forth. I had a really good childhood, very blessed childhood. But one thing I noticed about Norwich is that it really lacked opportunity and lacked resources for its citizens, for them to aspire to actually, use their potential to the fullest. And what I noticed over the years was that a lot of the citizens, people that I know, family and friends included, tended to wither away within the borders of Norwich and so forth. And that's when that was the catalyst behind the collection of poetry, BlackRoseCity, that I wrote about. And it talks about and highlights about the communities of color that were pretty much forgotten or ignored. And, at what cost to these citizens, what happened to them, where the city either would flourish or dwindle. In either direction or either end of the spectrum, it would leave these communities of color, out of the narrative. And so BlackRoseCity is that collection of poetry that really just captures the voice of those citizens, friends, family, community members, so on and so forth, in a way to actually, tell their story. And so that was the catalyst behind the book. And, my upbringing in Norwich is the force that drives the narrative throughout BlackRoseCity.
Yeah, because I had moved from Philippines to the Norwich, North Franklin area when I was like 18.
A quick sidebar. I'm going to Manila next month. So we need to actually talk about some places that may suggest for me while I'm in the Philippines.
Oh my goodness. What are you doing there? Is it just for a visit?
For a visit. I'm going to visit a friend over there who's coming from Thailand. He'll be there for a couple of weeks. And so I'm going over to hang out with him and just explore. So we need to talk about that.
That's fantastic. Awesome. Yeah. Well, I haven't been there since the 80s. So it's like, a lot has changed from my understanding.
Okay.
But yeah, so if you can imagine coming from, the Philippines to there, Norwich, Connecticut, my first impression was it was, aside from culture shock coming from another country to here, it was very depressed. It was cold, depressed, not much going on. And it still remains to be that kind of struggling city. But from my understanding, when I visited last time, this year, actually, it seems to be trying to do something. I saw new shops, that the arts community is still trying to do something, but still not taking off as much. But anyways, that's the dichotomy. And it's hard to explain unless you live there, right. How it really is. And being a person of color also is it's definitely a different experience. I understand you are the Hartford Poet Laureate now.
Yes.
Can you tell us how that came to be and what are your current projects in that post? Yeah,
so about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, there was a posting for the Connecticut Cultural Commission here in Hartford had posted that they were reaching out for their first poet laureate of the city of Hartford. And so there were particular guidelines in the application process. And so, I did fill out the application, and which, called for my past history with the arts and poetry, some publications, what I've been doing up to this point with poetry. And so I had submitted the application, and then I was notified that I was a top candidate for the position, but it also included a process. And so the first process was that the Cultural Commission of the Arts had to select me as the candidate. And so that was the first step. And so after that step, they submitted my name to the mayor, Luke Bronin of Hartford. And so I met with the mayor, sat with him and talked, and he asked me about, my aspirations and my history and so forth. And so that went very well. And so he gave me his stamp of approval. And then the third step was I had to actually meet with city council. And so I met with city council and spoke with them and so forth. And the same process, my aspirations and what would I bring to the city if I was appointed the poet laureate. And lo and behold, I, was approved by the city council and received the official appointment actually last November in 2018. And so the process went from May to pretty much November, actually. And during the entire time, I wasn't able to discuss it, talk about it, or tell anybody. So I had to hold my tongue for like a good, 6 months almost until it was official. And then once it was official, it was like a great release because I could actually talk about it. And it's just been a phenomenal roller coaster ride ever since. It's a 3-year appointment. I've just completed my first year. And it's just been great opportunities.
What kind of events and things that you've so far have done?
So one of the first things that I started was a creative writing campaign, a literacy campaign titled #BeatLit. Hartford is known as the Beat, right? Heartbeat. So the Beat is for Hartford, and Lit, of course, is for literature. And what BeatLit does, actually, its mission really, it illustrates interactive creative writing campaign that's designed to amalgamate like the literary and performing arts of poetry. And so what Beatlit does is it combines the element of active reading with generative creative writing exercises to like compose like a literary and or performance poetry in order to improve the competency and confidence of aspiring writers. So there are some writers out there who, they write and they're really nervous about reading / performing. And then on the other side of the coin, there are performers, performing arts poets who really don't know much about the literary techniques. And so what Beatlit does is it really brings these two together. And the way that I actually utilize the program is that I established working relationships with local schools, libraries, community organizations, institutions, art venues, throughout the greater Hartford area to encourage young writers to like really, achieve their literary dreams. Like if you want to be a poet, and you don't know how, Beatlit can show you how. It's okay. It's cool to be a poet, Really wanted to inspire young writers to really just achieve their literary dreams. And so I this past year, I've done up to date about 54 readings, presentations.
Wow, 54?
Yeah, in this first year alone. Churches, libraries, schools, high schools, awesome. Middle schools, just all over the place, venues. And so it's just been a great roller coaster ride. One of the things that really kicked it off was that the Hartford Courant did a nice spread on me last December 26th. It was a full spread, and that really helped to promote the campaign. And a lot of people have just been, reaching out to me on email. They didn't know we had a laureate in Hartford. They were excited to hear about it. They heard me read somewhere. And so a lot of emails coming in just to help spread the word of poetry. So it's a great roller coaster ride. So
how long has the, I honestly never heard that there was actual Hartford Poet Laureate. Is that something new?
Yeah, I'm actually the first.
Yes. Okay. That explains it. I understand you also did something with University of Connecticut.
UConn. Yeah. So UConn had put on a health forum back in June, really highlighting the importance and significance of mental health, and particularly mental health when it comes to men. It's like a men's health forum. And so, I definitely shared some poetry there from BlackRoseCity, really talking and highlighting the mental, emotional constraints or struggles, I should say, that a lot of people that I grew up with, encountered and endured and so forth, including myself as well. And so that health forum was really, it was informative, but it was also had a very strong, empathetic vibe in the room where people felt, comfortable to disclose either personal antecedents or with friends or family members. And really there was a lot of healing that occurred during that forum. So it was a great opportunity to work with UConn. And I truly think opportunity as well. Yeah.
Now, we spoke a little bit about your collection, BlackRoseCity, and the premise of it. But do you have a couple of poems to share with us from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I can. I'll share a poem from BlackRoseCity, and I'll share a new collection that I'm finishing titled Sonogram, which is dedicated to my granddaughter. So I'll share one of those too. So, excuse me, a poem that I'll read from BlackRoseCity. It's titled Daddy's Little Girl, and the premise behind this poem is that, I wasn't always a professor. I wasn't always a poet laureate. After I graduated high school, I was having a daughter, and I didn't go to college, and I stayed in BlackRoseCity. And as a result, I got involved into drug dealing, actually. And as a means of, not that I needed to, but as a means of, I just really got lost. And so at the time, for whatever reason, this seemed like, the the thing to do, or the right thing to do, or the convenient thing to do, I should say. And so in 1995 is when I actually was arrested. And so this poem, my daughter was 5 years old at the time. And so this poem is titled Daddy's Little Girl. And it highlights that day from her point of view, what she saw through her eyes and so forth. And so it's titled Daddy's Little Girl. Mm-hmm. Frolicking underneath her Barney comforter, she chuckles at the parade of Looney Tunes caressing her powder blue walls. The faint thump in the distance startles her early morning fantasy. The second one leaves her longing for that left turn at Albuquerque. The front door crashes. Uniformed men storm upstairs waving shiny black shooters. They shout commands in a language foreign to her soft ears. Her father leaps from his bed, met with 6 shooters similar to Yosemite Sam's. Get your ass on the ground. He obeys, his bare chest pressed against the carpet. Her mother's silent tears denote compliance. 5 years of life. She stands, frozen. Her father, hog-tied. Baby powder concealed in a clear plastic bag. Examined. Young, ebony eyes plead for mommy. Disappointed. Droplets of shame course his sullen cheeks. Flashes of reddish blue fade in the distance. Men with 5-star shining pieces of silver pinned to chest take her father away. Mm. That poem really just highlights, as I said before, what she saw on that day. And she's 29 now with her own daughter, and she still remembers that day. So it was a very significant impact, mental, emotional impact on myself and, of course, on her. Another poem I'll share is for my niece, Eve Montgomery Knowles, who actually, due to complications, only lived for a day. Oh. It was December 31st, 2001, New Year's Eve, of course. And she passed that day. And we were in the hospital in her mother's room and so forth. And I saw in the corner this little green box. And I opened it, and then inside of it, it had a little baby brush and a lock of her hair. And it stuck with me for a while. And then so when I was creating this book, this poem came about. And it's titled Little Green Box for Eve Montgomery Knowles, December 31st, 2001. My sweet little niece, Eve, knowing nothing about you, I have to write something. I have to tell everyone that I love you. Your family loves you. Here, such a short period of time, leaving behind broken hearts, leaving behind a little green box, a box containing the elements of your existence, containing a picture of an angel with closed windows to her soul, a little green box containing a hat, comb, PJs, and a lock of hair. The last poem that I'll share from the new collection titled Sonogram. So, well, actually, there's 2 more. This one's real short. This one's titled Newborn. I'm sure my father would have told me about his summer nights in Harlem before his heart stopped talking, months after mine began. So my father passed away when I was 6 months old. And
So there's the parallel, yeah.
yeah, I was his ninth child. And so, he served in the Korean War, in the Navy.
Wow.
I researched his records and I visited his gravesite. And so this poem here is titled His Last Name Mine, about that experience. His last name, mine. I enter Cedar Grove's office and extend the slit of sunlight, peering through a cracked door. Lock eyes with an old sexton inscribing names of fallen souls. I stammer hello, utter the silent K in my last name. He flips through an index of ancient files, brushes a layer of cumulus dust from 1974, and engraves 56 R7 HK onto the yellow surface of a Post-it. I thank him for his time, slowly exit his office, and descend down the hillside, studying each pillar in search of my father's marker. I pause in front of a pallid row of ancient stone, flap the Post-it over a cluster of ants to unveil the worn plaque of a Negroid sailor. His last name, mine. Clouded tears recall the legacy of an airman recruit rigging chutes from the USS Wright. A native son swaying to Coltrane in Korean cafes with cinnamon women who never choked on the plume of black smoke sewn into his skin. Debating Truman's liberation of Yongsan that would churn 5 million souls into Korean dust.
This is part of your new collection, right?
Yeah. The last two poems are part of the new collection titled Sonogram. That the deadline to finish is December 31st, which is another 3 weeks from now or 4 weeks. From now. So I'll be finished with that, and I'll be pushing it out for publication in the new year. Well, actually, I'll be in search of publication, I should say. I'm going to actually send it out. I'm actually going to enter into a couple of publication contests and so forth, and solicit for a publisher and see who bites. Because it's an evolutionary process from BlackRoseCity to Sonogram. I wrote BlackRoseCity. It was part of my senior thesis, grad school thesis, back in 2007, and I published it in 2011. And it's, so it's been quite some time from the first book to the second book. And BlackRoseCity has found a resurgence through this laureate position and so forth. So it's, has gained some newfound steam. But the evolution. Yes, the evolutionary process from BlackRoseCity to Sonogram is a lot of depth and a lot of growth. So I'm looking forward to pushing this one out there.
Well, I'm looking forward to it too, because knowing where BlackRoseCity, you began with BlackRoseCity, and to see where this evolution it takes you to, it would be amazing to read about. I just want to ask you, what was the pivotal moment in your life that you can look back and say, if I had taken this road, I would not have been a poet, a professor, English professor, a poet, a Hartford Poet Laureate. I know when I look back in my life, I'm like, wow, if I had been still, hanging out in the streets or hanging out with my friends, and that, seemed like to me that I hadn't planned on writing and being a writer and an artist. It just found me and it just happened. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, in a sense. I really started admiring poetry when I got into hip hop and so forth, back in, I was born in 73, hip hop started in 72. So by the time I was like 7, 8 years old, I'm hearing, this music that has, really, catchy beat and bass line and drums and you're hearing these guys, recite poetry, using literary techniques and rhyme scheme and so forth. And, they're making it sound cool, and they look cool doing it. I was just like, what is this? Who are these people? And so, that was really my initial influence. And so that was the birth of poetry for me, even though I didn't start writing actual poetry until I was 26. But it was just, really planted the seed at a very early stage in my life. And, I really started to actually write poetry senior year of undergrad, because I went to school a little bit later and so forth after my decision makings and stuff like that. And and so after my senior year undergrad is when, my professor really, she's sociology class, because I majored in sociology, minored in criminal justice. And, she really started turning me on to literature by, Black authors. And Nathan McCall makes me want to holler, Autobiography of L.A. Gangster by Monster Cody. And it was just like, whoa, like, growing up in BlackRoseCity, dominantly white educational system, we didn't get to read any authors
right.
And so here I was, like, really just my eyes are open and so forth. And that's when the poetry started spilling out, like literally in her class. And I wrote and I performed for a couple of years, and from 99 to 04, I met you in 03. And in 04 is when I was like, you know what, I really love this poetry and I wanted to craft my skills. And so I went, and enrolled in grad school for literature and so forth. And my eyes opened up even to more authors of color and Black literature and so forth. And I think that's when it really, the poet just really burst out. And I was, had the opportunity to start to teach, because I did a fellowship. I did 2 fellowships actually in my last year of grad school. And so that's when the teaching component came in. So right when my senior year of grad school, I started teaching part-time as part of the fellowship. And then when I graduated, I taught for a year part-time. And then, as a result of the fellowship, a full-time position opened up, tenure track at the college, Three Rivers. And it was great because I just came back full circle back home, which I never planned to do actually, but who does? And the college is right across the street from where I grew up at. So I'm literally back home in my own neighborhood, my own community, and really just paying homage to those who have really helped me become who I am. And so poetry was it's just been instilled since childhood, really.
And you're still holding true to the form on the spoken word tip, right?
Well, see, I am as much as I possibly can. I don't, really travel too much on spoken word poetry as much as I used to. I have more literary readings and so forth, and especially with the laureate position. So I really kind of put the performance aspect to the back burner. If time and need be, I definitely can. But like from 2001 to 2004, I was really traveling across the country, really, hitting the spoken word really hard. And then, once I started to study the literary techniques, what I realized, and actually Patricia Smith, heard her speak one day, and she actually was talking about how to establish ourselves as literary writers and not be boxed into spoken word poets and spoken word poetry, because she actually started with spoken word and so forth, but she also, went to grad school and got her literary degrees and so forth. And because there's this weird, unspoken battle between literary poets and spoken word, and so what she said was that they would like to box you as a spoken word poet, which means that you don't have these literary credentials and so forth and blah, blah, blah. Even though the credentials are not important, But in the end, it's like, no, I'm a poet, period. Right. So if you want to try to box me as this spoken word, blah, 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 that you don't acknowledge, she was like, well, I mean, have you seen my list of publications and so on and so forth? And right now her list of publications is exponential. And so I really learned from her to, solidify yourself as a poet and don't let them box you into this spoken word poetry realm.
I understand. I've heard of that argument before, too. Yes. However, spoken word is an art form, and it takes talent to do. And you have some performances on YouTube, right?
Yes, I do, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've seen you perform before. So, the evolution is real. We are continuing to evolve as we speak.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely. Spoken word poetry was a great platform for me. I mean, it really helped me get my wings and really helped me. It's my cornerstone, it really is. But like you said, there's that evolutionary process. And if you refuse to grow, then we become stagnant. And that is, I think, the nemesis of artistry,
Absolutely. But I understand you were out in South Africa kind of recently, networking and creating with folks out there.
Yeah, I actually have a friend out there. And so I visit periodically. I've been out there about 4 times now. And, when I go out, we definitely link because we're really trying to bridge the artistry across the African diaspora,
Yes.
which is the descendants of ancestors here in America that were enslaved and so forth, and really trying to bridge, to our ethnic roots and ethnic culture and so forth, our ancestry. And so, I periodically will travel out to South Africa. Botswana actually is the country right above South Africa that I visit. And, I've done some creative writing workshops over there. I've done some community workshops on the HIV and AIDS and really instilling the artistry into social activism.
Yes.
I've done a tour over there as well, too. A couple of radio interviews, just really because, as you know, there's countries around the world that just look at America as this megaphone, and if there's ways that we can actually help to bridge, our struggles, our concerns, our laughter, our light, and artistry is the way to do it. So I've utilized poetry in that means to really help bridge that gap between the African diaspora.
Wow. You're doing it. That's great.
I'm trying.
You're going all over the world, just spreading the poetry love, I tell you. Where can people go to learn more about you and your work now then?
Yeah, so you can find me on Facebook under Frederick-Douglass Knowles II. You can also follow me on Instagram at Hartford Poet Laureate. You can check out my website, Frederick-Douglass And I think that's about it. Those, of course, in YouTube as well. You can punch me up in YouTube under Frederick-Douglass Knowles or Yesod, which is YESOD, one of those two, and it will pop up. And those are the platforms I'm using right now as a means to, spread.
And do you have Twitter?
I do have Twitter, but I'm never on Twitter. I have to. So what is I get loyal to like one or two.
I know. I hear you.
Platforms. Of course, it's Facebook, and then of course also it's going to be Instagram. But on Twitter, I'm also Hartford Poet Laureate.
Okay.
At F Douglass Knowles. So I'm gonna tweet right now. Matter of fact.
Great, Frederick. It's been great catching up with you, and I wish you the very best of luck. Please stay in touch, okay?
Oh, definitely, Christina. Thank you for the opportunity. It's good to hear from you. Who knows? Maybe I'll be down in Florida sometime soon. Spreading some poetry.
Sounds good. You take it easy.
You too. Peace.
Well, everyone, that is it for now. Please tune in next week for my next featured guest. In the meantime, have a productive and creative week. Bye, Frederick.
Peace.